Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is Gabrielle Ray and I present cases of the missing, the unidentified, and unsolved homicides. Today I'll be presenting the unsolved homicide of Myrtle Cole, who was found deceased on December 12, 1981 in Stearns County, Minnesota. She was born on February 24, 1900, and she was 81 years old at her time of death. She lived by herself after her husband passed several years prior, and she was well known in the town site of Fairhaven, which is in the southeast portion of Stearns County. Fairhaven is a very small town, and at the time of her death, had a population of only 100 residents, and it only really had a small tavern, a grocery store, a church, and a city hall, and some houses. She was described as friendly, caring, strong-willed, generous, and very religious. She held Bible studies in her home, even though she had no running water. She took care of her mom for much of her adult life, and she married at age 48 to a man 11 years who's her senior, who ended up dying in 1970. She cleaned people's houses when she was younger, and she had chronic migraines, so she could not work. She relied on Social Security checks and food stamps, and it was also well known that she was fearful of someone breaking into her home. She always kept her doors locked at night and mostly kept to herself. She'd walk down to the store for her groceries about one time a week. We'd wave at each other and she'd say hi, but that's about it, said Carol Schmidt, her down the street neighbor. At 10:13 a.m., Stearns County Sheriff's officers received information about an elderly woman deceased in her residence in the town site of Fairhaven. She was found by her nephew Milo, who forced his way into her home after his phone calls to her went unanswered. He drove 2 miles up to her home to check on her, and when he arrived, he found glass strewn across the kitchen floor and on top of the stove. She was found lying on her bed, with a quilt covering her head and her face. She had been strangled and stabbed. She was brutally attacked in her bedroom, and her cause of death was from multiple stab wounds. Old crime scene photos show the front door wide open and glass shattered on the floor. The killer had broken through a window. Police believe that the murder occurred sometime between 10 p.m. on December 11th and 9:30 a.m. on December 12th. No weapon was found, but police say it could have been a knife or some kind of sharpened blade. Their best piece of evidence found was a bloody palm print found on a pillowcase. Over the years, the bloody palm print was compared to thousands of other palm prints, including every single time someone is brought into jail. Hundreds of interviews were conducted, but no suspect has ever been identified. The only motivation we could come up with is really a drug-induced, sex-violent, or chaotic kind of killer, said Lieutenant Vic Weiss. Weiss also believes that the killer may still live locally. And police had ruled out 3 young men who helped her weatherize her home and whom she'd made a big dinner for just days before her murder, and her nephew. The 3 young men put plastic sheeting over her windows and tar paper along with the lower part of her house. She fixed them a nice chicken dinner for the teen boys. 3 residents say that they spotted a car with its lights on parked in front of her house at around 2 a.m. on Saturday. And another neighbor, who refused to be named, said she saw men peeking in the windows along Myrtle's block shortly after midnight. A suspect with the last name of Barry told 3 16-year-old visitors he broke through her back door during the night, choked her, and held a knife to her throat, and raped her and stabbed her. As he told the story, he pulled a razor-sharp knife about 11 inches long from between sofa cushions and said this was the murder weapon. The knife was described as more than 2 inches wide and had a stain near the handle. He said that he and a friend from Minnetonka planned to rob her, and they knew she lived alone because they followed her home from a store and watched her. However, nothing seemed to come of this confession. It seems unlikely that a random stranger just happened to find that town and just happened to find a female that lived by herself, said Sheriff Steve Soika. Stearns County Sheriff's officers were assisted in their investigation by State Patrol, Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office, The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and the Tri-County Major Crime Unit, which included numerous law enforcement personnel from agencies in the surrounding areas. The Tri-County Crimes Unit of Benton and Sherburne counties and its helicopters also helped, as well as the Behavioral Science Unit in Quantico, Virginia. The FBI also developed a psychological profile of the perpetrator. The FBI profile of the perpetrator was released in June of 1982, and the profile leans towards a young person likely with mental health issues. Lieutenant Weiss also believes that heavy drug usage and violence went on that night. Limited information has been released about this crime. However, hundreds of people were investigated as possible suspects, including some who claim to have committed the murder, some involved in suspicious acts, and criminals across the country that committed similar murders, and many have been ruled out. 6 people are still being focused on as suspects. We still have a fairly long list of people we can't eliminate, said Weiss. Those on the active suspect list include local people, Minnesota residents, transients, and those who committed similar crimes. 6 investigators are assigned to investigate this case, including Lieutenant Weiss, all of which are general investigators working on cold cases throughout the county. 2 billboards were put up near Kimball asking for tips and offering a $1,000 reward in 2021. I think that billboard being up is a great idea. I think it could help solve this whole crime, said Dorothy Kirsten, who was acquainted with her at her time of death. According to investigators, the billboards did bring in helpful tips. As time has evolved for us in law enforcement in general, with science and technology, we're able to reevaluate the evidence we have, so we're presently doing that, said Soika. Police have resubmitted evidence into the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, hoping that advanced DNA technology could bring the killer to light. It changed our lives, said Dorothy. My mother-in-law was never the same after that. She was so sorrowful after losing such a good friend, said Verna Selmella, an acquaintance and mother. Verna also added that it was unbelievable that in a small town like ours that something like that should happen. This crime seems weird for Fairhaven. Something so bad could happen right there on the corner, said Carol. We know there are some people out there that have information that they're afraid to share. They're afraid of that person still being in the area, said Weiss. Soika believes that this case is close to being solved, and adds, it's very frustrating when you can't solve a crime and you have to leave it sitting there open. I think it's going to be solved by someone who knows something, said Weiss. We keep our doors locked at all times now, says Carol. A new home was built on the property where she once lived. She is the Queen of Spades in the Minnesota cold case cards. Now, that is all the information that I could find on the death of Myrtle Cole. And she lived 81 years of her life just to be taken out by someone so vicious and cruel. It's heartless. It's absolutely gut-wrenching. I mean, honestly. Imagine if this was your loved one, and still to this day, her killer is still out there free. And that's not fair. That's not fair to her. That's not fair to her loved ones. That's not fair to the community. So it's about time that somebody steps forward, because there is someone knows something. And it's only a matter of this information and this video even, or just people talking about it, reaching the right person. And I think if the right person, gets the feel that, hey, somebody's still looking at this case, people still care, possibly then the case could break wide open with a piece of information that somebody thinks could be small. No, that could be the key in solving this case. And if you or anybody you know have any information on this case, please call the Tri-County Crimestoppers at 1-800-255-1301. Or you can submit a tip online at p3tips.com. Please, everybody, it's time to bring justice for Myrtle. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful night.